Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Questions and Answers. Today is Saturday, August the 10th. We've got a small selection of some really good questions that were asked by you, the viewers, over the last week. So we're going to kind of dive right into them here, enjoying the nice day. It's perfect weather out here in Newburgh, New York today. A little overcast, a little bit of sun here and there, but temperature is right about 80 or just below. No humidity. Really nice day. Great day to be outside and answer some of your questions from the last week. So the first one comes from Mike Jordan. Mike asks, "Hey Pete, I really enjoy the show and appreciate your opinions on a wide variety of music. Just wanted to get your take on Bad Company with Brian Howe in the 80s. I think Brian Howe is one of the most underrated singers in rock history, and I really enjoyed that era. It's totally different from the 70s Bad Company, but that doesn't mean it's not good. Many thanks." So I had a couple of those Bad Company albums that Brian did with the band, and I also have he was appeared on a Ted Nugent album as well. You know, it's hard to call Brian an underrated singer because he really hasn't done a lot of recordings over the years, but you know, he obviously a very talented singer. I always liked his vocal ability. My take on the whole Bad Company thing, at some point when you've got a like super iconic singer who has a very distinctive, unique style, sometimes it is very difficult to replace that with someone who pretty much doesn't sound anything like them. You know, case in point of where it works, when Dio replaced Ozzy in Black Sabbath. Dio sounds nothing like Black Sabbath. I mean, Dio sounds nothing like Ozzy. And the music on Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules a bit different from the 70s era Black Sabbath with Ozzy, but it worked, right? Because the music was great. It was still Black Sabbath, you know, for a new decade, obviously, but it worked even though the singers were so drastically different. In more recent years, you've seen a lot of bands who have lost an iconic lead singer. Either they've left the band, they've retired, or maybe they passed away. And what they've done is they've gone out and gotten the singers who kind of sound similar, or maybe a lot similar, because the fans want to hear a very similar sound and style to what they're used to. I think the reason why the Brian Howe era of Bad Company didn't really work, you know, at first there was a lot of curiosity. Oh my God, Bad Company's back. You know, probably a lot of people didn't even know that Paul Rodgers wasn't in the band anymore, right? Maybe some people did, but they figured, well, it's still Bad Company. Let's hear how it sounds. I think that first album they did together, a lot of interest in that. But, you know, as good as those albums are, didn't really sound like Bad Company, to me anyway, okay? Far enough away from that classic sound. And, you know, unfortunately, Bad Company is all about that voice, and to a lesser extent, the guitar riffs of Mick Routh's. So I think, you know, I saw Bad Company live a couple times during that era, and while they were fine live, really wasn't the same. But I kept listening, okay? I think, again, great singer. I think to your point, I think Brian is a fantastic singer. I just don't think that worked. It didn't work for him in Bad Company because he replaced someone who was just so iconic, such a, you know, one of the best vocalists of all time. I don't think anybody would deny that. And the band just didn't really sound like Bad Company anymore after a while. Good music, right? Maybe they should have just called it something else. I don't know. Again, Mick was perfectly fine to go carry on as Bad Company, right? As a founding member. But I think as the years went on, fans became less and less interested because it's like, God, this just doesn't sound like the Bad Company I know and love anymore. From Lazarus, "Hi Pete, being a Prog guy, I was curious if you were familiar with Pendragon. Love all their albums, especially The Window of Life. Curious to your thoughts." Yeah, I've been listening to Pendragon for a long time. Probably since, like, God, 90 or 91, something like that. The Window of Life is a great album. In fact, I think that's it might be the first album I ever got by them. Or maybe it was The World. No, I think The World was the first album I ever got. Window of Life is fantastic. And probably my favorite album is The Masquerade Overture. Great double album. You know, just a really fantastic band. You know, Nicky Barrett, Clive Nolan on keyboards. I love Clive's playing. Peter G. and Jan Vincent Velasco, who's, you know, fairly new to the band. Back when I was listening to them a lot, they had he wasn't in the band. But really good kind of melodic neo-progressive rock. Good stuff. Really good band. You know, I love like Pendragon and IQ, early Marillion, all that kind of stuff. Great stuff. From Mike F. Hey, Pete, how are you doing? Thank you for what you do. SOT is the best. Thank you. My friends and I were talking about Ritchie Blackmore and Deep Purple. The question on the table was when was Ritchie at his best? I said he was at the height of his powers from 75 to 80 during his Rainbow days. They all said why. I told them that he had the freedom to go with his guitar solos. Stargazer and Light in the Black, what is your opinion? Also, what is your opinion on the prog metal band Darkwater and their album Human? Thank you for your time. Keep up the great work. All right, first, I've never listened to Darkwater, so can't help you there. But as far as Blackmore, his best work, I'm going to say probably from In Rock through to Straight Between the Eyes. So we're talking about 1970 through to about 1982. Personally, for me, that is his best body of work. And I think if we're going to narrow it a little bit more, I still think the best body of work is from 70 to, the Down to Earth album. So 70 to 80, okay, or 79, whatever year that album came out. I just think that, In Rock, Fireball, Made in Japan, Machine Head, Who Do We Think We Are, Burn, Stormbringer, Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, Rising, and those first couple Rainbow albums are pretty awesome. Some of his best playing, but I think for me, I think I just love that those 4 years in Purple, 4 or 5 years, probably from Stormbringer back to In Rock, some of the best stuff ever. And I love the early Rainbow stuff too, but I still really like, Rainbow Rising is just a perfect album. If you were to ask me what my favorite Blackmore recordings ever are, it'd be Rainbow Rising, certainly, Burn, In Rock, Fireball, Machine Head, and if you want to just look at some live stuff, I think, the stuff that made Europe, that last tour with him before he left Deep Purple, that was some of his best playing ever on that tour, and of course, the Made in Japan album is killer. So that's, for me, 70s Blackmore is prime Blackmore, and I love the, don't get me wrong, I love the Joe Lynn Turner era Rainbow. He was pretty fiery there, as well as the reunion with Purple, but it's just something I sensed a little less fire and danger to his playing after the 80s kind of happened, and when he started taking Rainbow on a little more commercial waters. For me, his playing was lacking a little something there. Still excellent, don't get me wrong, but I miss some of that kind of, I don't know, like I said, I always call it danger from the 70s, when the early Purple days and certainly the early Rainbow days. What else we got? All right, so from Kenny Ritchie. Hey, Pete, I know you have talked about tribute bands before. My question, is there a tribute band that you pay and see every time they come around? Only one I look forward to every year is British Floyd from England, or Brit Floyd from England. They are spot on musically, and their light show is one of the most expensive on tour. Always a great job, Pete. Thanks. I don't. I have seen plenty of tribute bands in this area where I live, over the years. I've seen some really good Queen tribute bands. I've seen a couple Santana tribute bands. There's a couple like Ozzy, Black Sabbath tribute bands. There's a couple Zepp again. There's a Led Zeppelin tribute band. A good friend of mine, Kevin Slover, plays guitar in that band. They're very good. I've seen them a few times. I don't religiously go to tribute band shows, though. Usually because I'm still seeing some of the main bands, right? I'm sure there's going to come a time where most of the bands that I love are no longer, and I'm going to be left going to these tribute band shows, and I'll probably go to them more often than not. I mean, there's Allman Brothers tribute bands around here. There's a Journey tribute band that plays around here a lot. Stones tribute. I mean, every band you could possibly think of have tribute bands playing fairly frequently. But no, to answer your question, I don't go religiously to catch them time and time again, because in many cases I'm still going to see the actual bands that they're paying tribute to. So when that day ends, I might go to more of them. So, but we'll see. From Walter Gill. Hey, Pete, I hope that all is well with you and your world these days. It's been a while since I had sent you a question. I'm just wondering if you're into prog and or symphonic metal, and who's your top 2 or 3 bands that can keep you listening to an epic track without being totally bored. My top 3 are Dream Theater, Nightwish, and Iced Earth, And can you top my 3? Love your page and hope that you'll please bring back new album Fridays soon, and even a segment that has to do with notable events in rock and metal history that other rock music media don't want to recognize, and please consider my suggestions. Hope to hear from you soon. My question for you is, when did I ever do new album Fridays? I don't recall ever doing that, so I'm not really sure what you're talking about. Unless you're talking about, my What's Hot with Sea Tranquility show, which is the new product release show. I don't recall ever just limiting them to Fridays. I do them fairly regularly, so it sounds like you've been missing those. I do them almost every week, and sometimes multiple per week. So go to our playlist and check out the new product review shows, the What's Hot shows. I have a playlist. They're all in there. So I review new music all the time here. So I'm trying to do more than ever. So, but back to your original question. I love progressive metal. I love symphonic power metal, all that kind of stuff. I would think my favorite bands in that kind of genre, in that style, Dream Theater certainly. Dream Theater and Symphony X kind of head and shoulders for me above all. I love both Dream Theater and Symphony X. They're the top 2. It's not even close. I dig Camelot quite a bit. I love Seventh Wonder, Vanden Plas, and I love Iced Earth as well. Iced Earth is a great band. I dig Nightwish. They're not one of my favorites, but I like Nightwish. Epica is another band I dig quite a bit. From Arnaud B. When rock musicians like Jeff Beck, Carlos Santana, Todd Rundgren, Frank Zappa, etc. leans towards jazz fusion, they're praised as adventurous, ambitious, and so on. But when jazz musicians like Miles Davis, Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, and Jean-Luc Ponty lean towards jazz fusion or jazz rock, they're accused of compromising themselves or being commercial and so on. Why the double standards on here? Well, because I think, and we probably have a couple viewers, Vince Guarna, I'm thinking in particular, who probably talk about this a little better than me, but I think that in a lot of instances, jazz musicians are considered some of the best musicians out there. And I think when especially like in the 60s and the 70s, when jazz musicians who played traditional jazz music for a living, that's what they did for many years, added rock elements to their sound, a lot of the jazz purists felt that they were dumbing down their music. Okay. On the same token, rock musicians, are not looked at as highly as jazz musicians are, as far as their overall scope of musical knowledge. That's kind of how I take that. And I think that when they see a rock musician who maybe is very fluent in rock music or the blues and maybe a little folk or whatever, all of a sudden adding jazz elements to their music, it's like, oh my God, they're really expanding their sound. That's amazing that they're branching out into that territory, right? Because it's adding a new repertoire to maybe some musical genres that aren't considered as virtuoso as jazz. And let's face it, jazz is very accomplished. Jazz is very complicated. I give props to anybody who can play jazz music. I dabble in guitar. I'm mostly a rock player and rock and blues player. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination what you consider a virtuoso or a very, very skilled player. I fumble around doing what I've been doing for many, many years. It's fun for me. It's a hobby. I like collecting guitars, but it's like if I were to all of a sudden turn around and start really learning some jazz music, that would be, that's really something to work towards. And people would look at me and say, wow, Pete's really getting his shit together. He's going out and learning some jazz, right? I think it's, that's kind of what we're talking about here. But meanwhile, the jazz musicians take that skill and everything that they've learned in that genre of music, and they're constantly trying to reinvent and expand upon themselves. And I think a lot of purists, when they hear jazz musicians going and playing pop or rock or adding those elements into their music, it's almost like, oh, well, they're like moving backwards, right? That's the best way I can explain it. Like we said, we may get some folks that chime in who maybe are jazz musicians themselves and maybe can explain it a little bit better, but I think that's kind of what it is. Because I know like a lot of those guys, like Miles and Herbie and Chick and what have you, Tony Williams, they got some heat from the critics. I think the fans loved it, especially because it opened up their music to a different audience. So there were a lot of rock fans who probably had never listened to these guys before they started adding rock elements to their music. How many rock fans ever listened to Miles Davis or Herbie Hancock or Chick Corea, okay, or John McLaughlin, or any of those guys before they went and started doing the jazz rock fusion stuff in the late 60s, early 70s. Probably not a lot. All of a sudden, they're the coolest thing ever. But the people who were listening to those guys playing traditional jazz music were probably like, oh my God, what is this noisy stuff? This isn't jazz anymore, right? From Jeff Audrain, Pete, you are spot on about music now being disposable. Don't get me started about precious things that are now throwaways. As you were talking, I just kept thinking how many wonderful hours I used to spend back in the day combing Peaches and Tower records and the myriad of bins in the used vinyl CD shops. I miss getting my hands on product before I buy it. Ordering stuff online just doesn't bring the same sense of awe and sheer joy of years past. Do you have the time and or inclination to wander the back bins of used shops? Or by what means do you acquire most of the music you love? Thanks for continued quality content you present. Well, unfortunately, most of what I order is online now. It's just the way of the world, right? Because there's very few places that sell physical music. And, you know, while there are a couple places here locally, I'll use Rock Fantasy's one. You know, Steve at Rock Fantasy admittedly doesn't stock a lot of CDs anymore. And that's pretty much what I buy because the CD sales aren't really there. He stocks a shitload of vinyl now. And I still do like going to a store, even though I don't buy vinyl and I listen to vinyl, because I gave up the vinyl thing many, many years ago. I still like going to Rock Fantasy and going through the countless bins and looking at the old LPs, seeing what I used to own or what, you know, what I might have wanted to have and pulling stuff. That's a very cool experience. And, you know, I even remember back in the day where I used to go to, you know, the CD shops, and I loved I used to spend hours and hours and hours at the old Tower Records, either in New York City or Jersey or Nyack or whatever, going through the CD bands, spending hours in Tower Records. I used to love doing that, and I miss that. You know, we have down the street here from where I live in a little mall, we've got an FYE store, which is absolutely fucking useless. You know, they've gone over the last bunch of, in fact, I haven't been in it in probably close to a year, but I used to drop in every now and then just because it's right down the street, and every month they would shorten and compact size those CD bins to the point now where they have almost nothing. Shh. Of course, I'm outside now. Both dogs are out with me, and now they have almost nothing, right? To the point where it's not even worth going in there because they're not carrying any CDs that I want to buy. And it's funny, you go in there and they're like, oh, did you find everything you're looking for? I'm like, no, you have nothing. So, of course, I did not find what I was looking for. So, yeah, so I know most of what I do is online now. Okay, it's just very easy. You find what you need, someone's got it, find the right price, click, ship, and you get it a couple days later. So it's pretty easy. So what are you going to do? From Julian, hi Pete, what's your opinion on the Mars Volta and Leprous? I think they're two of the more interesting bands of the modern progressive era. Well, the Mars Volta, you know, I remember when the Mars Volta first started to come into prominence, everybody was talking about them. It's like, oh, they're really original, the greatest thing ever, whatever. I picked up a couple Mars Volta CDs, and while I didn't dislike it, it just didn't really do a hell of a lot for me. They're okay, all right? Like I said, I don't dislike it. I think they're good musicians. I think they're certainly different, okay? But it just never really, I just never walked away from any Mars Volta thinking, wow, I really love that a lot, okay? I tried. Again, don't dislike it by any means. As far as Leprous goes, I really dug Leprous a lot early in their career. You know, when they first started out, they were like the backing band to Isan from Emperor. And then they started to put out their own music, and their first couple albums are great. Really good kind of like progressive rock / you know, black metal / symphonic metal. Really, really cool. I gotta tell you, the last like 2 albums of theirs I find pretty boring. They've eliminated like all the harshness from their music, and I just find their music extremely, the last 2 albums just really kind of, they're okay, but just really kind of generic and bland sounding to my ears. Thinking about where they came from to where they are now. And, you know, maybe, you know, the influence of Isan when they first started was so great that a lot of those kind of Emperor elements were kind of infiltrating their music, and now they're kind of morphing into their own thing. And I get that, and that's cool, but it's not interesting. It's not not much of interest to me. Not interesting enough for me. All right. Forgive me. It's a play on words there. From Noogie420, that's a new one. Do you think you can go to too many concerts? I pretty much go to a concert every week, sometimes 3 concerts in a week. I like a wide variety of artists and types of music. It's funny you should ask that, Noogie420, because that topic has actually been coming up in my house the last couple of days because I've seen 3 shows in the last week and a half, and that's a lot for me nowadays. I mean, I used to go to easily a show or 2 a week a bunch of years ago for just forever. I was constantly going to shows. And I think where I'm at in my life, like in other words, so I saw Joe Bonamassa, the Rolling Stones, and the Alice Cooper and Hailstorm, all within, like I said, a span of like 10 days. And I thought the last one of the 3 was the Alice Cooper show, and that was fantastic. But I got home and I was like, okay, I'm done for a while. Because it's a lot for me at my age, with all I got going on, outside of, with work and family and this and everything else. It's a lot of traveling. It's a lot of expense. It's a lot of time. It's just, and as much as I enjoy seeing live music and I love going to see bands and what have you, and you've already heard me rant on this, it's just like I'm kind of up to here with dealing with people at concerts, man. It really bugs me the way people act at live concerts nowadays. So I think my tolerance level is at a minimum for a lot of that, so I'm going to probably start going to less. And I think, you know what it is too? I've seen every band that I ever wanted to see multiple times now. And in some instances, many, many multiple times. So it's like, do I need to keep going seeing these same bands playing, mostly the same set list over and over and over and over again? No. So what I've been doing like the last year or 2 is I really kind of just limiting myself to the bands that really mean a lot to me, that I know maybe I'm going to get to see them in play a different set list or something like that. Maybe go catch them that one last time before, they retire or whatever. So I go to the stuff that I really want to go to now. And if it's a band that I'm like, yeah, they're okay, I won't go. I don't go just to go anymore. I go if I know it's going to mean something to me, and if I know I'm really going to enjoy it. So, but that's just where I am right now. From Bong Along. If you met someone who has not heard any progressive rock, what 3 or 4 or 5 albums would you suggest to start them off on their prog adventure? All right, Bong Along, I've been kind of asked this question many, many times, and I've answered it many, many times, but I'm going to do it again this one last time. So if you're someone brand new to progressive rock and you want a starter kit, here's what I recommend. Yes, Close to the Edge. Yes, Fragile. ELP, Brain Salad Surgery. Genesis, Selling England by the Pound. Jethro Tull, Aqualung. Pink Floyd, Animals. Go at it. If you don't like that stuff, I don't know what to tell you. It's probably not meant for you. All right? Those are my choices. Those are some iconic albums that I think anybody who either loves prog or is hoping to get into prog, if you can't get into those albums, this genre ain't for you, my friend. From Vols Fan 90. I got a non-music related question for you, Pete. In a recent video, you briefly mentioned that you dig Werewolves when talking about the cover art in the new Grand Magus album. What are your favorite werewolf movies? My favorite is a tie between The Howling and Dog Soldiers. All right, well, yeah, I love werewolf films. I love talking about werewolves. I just think they're the coolest thing ever. Ever since I was a little kid, probably like 3, 4 years old, I've loved werewolves. So my favorite films, of course, my favorite all time is The Wolfman, the original. Lon Chaney Jr., Universal. That's the blueprint for all of it, right? For going back that far, I also really dig the other, even earlier film from Universal, The Werewolf of London. That kind of started it all, really. But the big money maker and that really jump started the werewolf genre was The Wolfman, obviously. American Werewolf in London, I dig quite a bit. The Howling, the first one, is awesome. Dog Soldiers is great. I really love Dog Soldiers a lot. Curse of the Werewolf, the old Hammer film done in, what was that, 1960? 59, 60, 61, something like that. Great film. Curse of the Werewolf, love that. I really like the more recent times. I like the Underworld films a lot, especially the third one, because the third one, all the Underworld films center on this battle between werewolves and vampires, but the third one really centers on the whole werewolf part of it, and I like that one a lot. Bad Moon is a great werewolf film from the late 80s, early 90s, something like that, with Mariel Hemingway. Really good film. The Ginger Snaps movies are a lot of fun. I think there was 3 of them, 4 of them, something like that. And, there's so many of them. Those are some of the best ones. I even like the remake of The Wolfman that they did, I don't know, like 8 years ago or something like that. I thought that was pretty good. But a lot of, I can go on all day talking about werewolf films. I own so many of them. These are just my favorites. I have a hell of a lot more than that. You know what's also good too? Silver Bullet, the Stephen King adaptation. That's good too. From Spaghetti Lee, El Douchebag. Spaghetti Lee, where have you been, dude? Haven't heard from you in a while. Legendary concert promoter Bill Graham was once asked to comment on the loyalty of the Grateful Dead's fan base. Mr. Graham replied, "There are many artists I love to see live, but there is no other audience I'd rather be a part of than probably the Dead audience." Mr. Graham was referring to the loyalty, fun, and sense of community among Deadheads. My question to you is, has there ever been a band you've seen live many times and felt a sense of community with other fans? Peace from Spaghetti Lee. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely a community thing, a communal thing going on with Dream Theater fans. Did you guys see that Dragonfly just flew by? Very cool. There's something about Dream Theater fans, right? I've seen Dream Theater live more than any other band in my life, well over 20 times. And you go hang out at a restaurant or a bar or outside, in the parking lot or on the sidewalk when you're getting ready to go into a Dream Theater gig. People are talking. They're talking about that. So what do you think of the album? So what do you think of the set list they're playing so far this tour? Do you think they're going to add these songs? How do you think it's going to be different tonight? All this kind of stuff. There's this thing, because I think a lot of Dream Theater fans are like music nerds. And nerds, like comic book fans, like Trekkies, love talking about and overanalyzing this stuff. So I think there is a thing about Dream Theater fans that we all share, and it's like, we've got this kind of this synergy together. I often experience that same thing at Yes shows. I've seen Yes a lot in my life too. I think Yes fans also all have this sense of family. Rush fans to an extent, not as much as those two. I also think there is a kind of a Black Sabbath community. And the many times I've seen Black Sabbath over the years, there's a certain understanding among Sabbath fans that I think really kind of hits home. Everybody just you feel like you're part of a pack, so to speak. But I think as far as the closest to the Grateful Dead thing, I think for me is probably Dream Theater or Yes. But I know exactly what you're talking. I've never actually seen the Grateful Dead proper. I've seen Further a couple times, and yeah, there's totally this. Everybody's on the same wavelength. It's pretty cool actually. From Raymond Kaiser, Pete, rock bands are notorious for band members quitting or being kicked out due to bad blood or creative differences between original founding members, and each one deciding they are going to move forward and tour using the name of the band. Conflict often results as to who should be able to use the name, and often litigation ensues, resulting in someone being awarded the name while someone else has denied usage of the name. In your opinion, when this occurs, who do you consider the rightful owner holder of the name of the band, or should none of them be allowed to use the name? Or is this an area that simply has too many gray areas to it? It's a lot of gray areas, right? So I guess you have to. There's really no definitive statement on this because each band is different. So in some instances, you're going to have like maybe a founding member, and the rest of the guys that are in the band were not original members, but they've been in the band a long time, and there's a rift happening. The founding guy, maybe it's the singer, maybe it's the guitar player, whatever, he's out. He wants to carry on with the name of the band, but yet the other guys, maybe they've been in the band a decade, right? But they weren't original members. So, and there's more of them than him or her, right? So who gets it? Who gets to win that? Or do they both go out? In some instances you see like, okay, the singer is John Smith. He's a founding member. He's been there 30 years. The other guys have all joined in various places, but all been around. John Smith is out. He wants to do John Smith's Cycle of Sluts, right? And yet the other guys that want to continue on as Cycle of Sluts, right? So I don't know. Or, would the right thing to be is like they go their separate ways and nobody uses the name anymore. But then nobody makes any money, right? Because it's all in the name. So it's hard to say. I mean, we've seen so many examples of this, right? Like Sweet. You got two versions of Sweet. You got the Queensryche thing. You go on and on. There's so many of them. It's Saxon. It's like, God. It's like, when will this end, right? It's like, can't we all just kiss and make up and just, but it doesn't work that way. The world doesn't work that way, right? From Stuart Dunn, hi Pete, as always, love the clips you put out. Always give a thumbs up, especially to these questions and answers. Thank you, Stuart. By the way, the days of the respected rock critic are not dead, dude. You are at the forefront of keeping that fame alive. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. You had me chuckling with the singed hair story, too. It's looking better, though, isn't it? Getting better. It's growing. Getting better every day. A quick question. I had to throw that Tesla bit in there because I was just listening to Tesla the other day. A quick question. I know you have touched on this before. Which versions of classic albums sound better in the remastered or original CD? I go with the remasters mostly. They often sound clearer, brighter, more detailed. I can't pick up this compression some people moan about, like in Pink Floyd, Whitesnake, Black Sabbath, or Dio. Well, here's the thing. It depends on, it's in the eye of the beholder or the ear of the beholder, which sounds better to you. There's a good portion of society, especially who listen to this kind of music, right? Who they're very picky about what they hear. They listen to music on high quality stereo equipment, in a lot of cases, high quality headphones, right? Where you can hear all these differences. And these people will go and they will compare putting on an LP versus a CD, putting on an original CD pressing versus a later remaster that's been compressed and all this other stuff done to it, or maybe it's been remixed and all that. And they compare one to the other to the other. I personally don't do that. I very rarely listen to music on headphones. The only time I'm listening to headphones is if I'm on an airplane, I'm listening to the iPod, or if I'm at the gym listening to the iPod. I almost never listen to music at home on headphones. And I very rarely just listen to music, and just, I'm always doing something else because I'm so busy. The only time I'm really listening to music, and really, like I said, is when I'm listening to it on the iPod at the gym. I'm paying close attention to it. In the car, when I got tunes on in the car, I'm listening to it pretty intently. Obviously, when I'm reviewing stuff, you have to do that. But I personally like a lot of the remastered CDs that have come out. I think they sound dynamite. I mean, I've had many instances where I've had original pressings of CDs and I thought they sounded kind of dull and muddy and really low volume and just kind of eh. And then I get the remasters and they are brighter. They're a little louder, obviously. And personally, to me, it's a better listening experience. But if you're someone who gets into the nitty gritty of a listening experience, and they're using headphones, they're using expensive stereo equipment, they're looking for all those little balances and things like that. In a lot of instances, they don't like the way that they remaster CDs. Okay, remix CDs. They don't like the compression. It sounds distorted to them. It's not as crystal clear. But they're all different, right? I've heard some remasters that didn't sound great, even to my ears, right? Which again, I'm not looking at it from that very critical perspective. So it all depends on personal preference, But there have been some really, really good remasters that to me, there's no difference. They sound better than the original CDs I had. So from Scott McGregor, hey Pete, great show this week. My question is pertaining to one of the questions on your show about long progressive rock epics. I have noticed that another thing that has changed about prog epics that started to change about the late 70s. It seems like the British bands didn't rush to the next musical idea. The Brits allowed a song to unfold, or they put in transitions between songs that really added color and flow to the entire listening experience. Dark Side of the Moon, a great example of this. Pink Floyd did this a lot on all their 70s albums. Yes, especially on Close to the Edge, as well as on You and I, seemed where they were not afraid to climb to a musical peak and completely drop the intensity into choir moments. Scott, man, this alone. There are several examples of other British bands that did this. I've noticed that this is a trait with British bands. It seems like the Brits took more care in composition and Americans were better improvisers. I noticed by the late 70s this trait disappeared by the late 70s. My question is, why did we stop hearing this in progressive rock, and are there any new bands that still write this way? Well, we stopped hearing it because the 80s hit. And you know what that brought. Shorter songs, catchy melodies, hit singles. Progressive rock died, for the most part, at least on the mainstream level, as the 70s wore on because record labels wanted hit singles. They wanted more commercial songs and albums. And eventually that's what the people wanted too, right? The era of the radio hit single, the MTV video, all that kind of stuff. So what had to go? All those long, complicated songs. Done, right? However, the last part of your question, are there any new bands that still write this way? Yeah. Dude, there's so. If you're someone who has not, and Scott, I'm not singling you out here, but if you're someone who thinks that the best progressive rock ever recorded and written ended in 1979, where have you been? Because as of the late 80s, even the early 80s, you had IQ and Marillion, okay, Pendragon, bands like that. The 90s, you have Spock's Beard, the Flower Kings, and Ekelin, Anecdoten, Anglagard, Dream Theater. We can go on and on and on and on and on. All the band Glass Hammer. There's a million bands that have come out from all parts of the globe who have released quality progressive rock in the tradition of the old stuff. That epic tunes, those long instrumental passages, the catchy singing and melody and hooks. Great guitar work, analog keyboards, all that kind of stuff. So no, that didn't end with those greats from the '70s. As the stuff from the '70s, the blueprint and the best, of course. But if you think that there has not been any good prog released, since 1979, come on. There's plenty of it out. Just do the research. Shit, go to seatranquility.org, man. We've been writing about bands like that for the last 20 plus years. It's like stuff's not hard to find. This stuff is not dead, okay? Just because the classic bands stopped writing that way, creating music that way, doesn't mean that the rest of the universe stopped as well. So there's plenty of it out there. From Rand Kelly, Pete, lately I've been pondering bands that release one album, probably don't tour, and for some reason break up, leaving the one and only album as their permanent legacy. So how many of these are actually out there? Here's my chronological list. Touch, Blind Faith, Refugee, Armageddon, Hughes Thrall, Craft, Raintree, Crow, Polytown, Farpoint, Grace, Polyphony, Without Introduction, Casino, Spiral Architect. Oh, he's naming a lot of album titles here. Okay. Spiral Architect, The Skeptic's Universe, Pinnacle, Meld, Mars Hollow, Analog Missionary, all these CDs I own and love. Why did they all stop at one great album? One can only speculate, unfortunately. I mean, I don't know. You'd have to ask the bands. I think in some cases, like Hughes Thrall, a lot of egos there. A massive drug addiction for Glenn Hughes. There goes that. Armageddon. I think didn't one of the guys in the band die, right? And, then they eventually became Renaissance. It was Renaissance after. I can't even remember. But, that, again, you had a lot of big egos in Armageddon. Touch, I think Touch were like a year or two ahead of their time. If they might have came out a year or two later, maybe the public would have accepted their music a little bit more. What else we got on here? Blind Faith. That was an ego nightmare. That was probably never going to work long term. What else we got here? Stuff that I'm familiar with. Polytown. I don't know. It's hard to say. Spiral Architect. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. That debut album is fantastic, and they were being hailed as like the greatest progressive metal band to come out ever, and then you blinked and they were gone, right? Never to be heard from again. So I don't know. I think in a lot of cases it's just it's ego, it's different musical expectations from the fans. A lot of these, especially the more like super groupie type bands, people are expecting such great things and it's hard for the bands to live up to it. Or maybe some of these debut albums were so well received that the bands were like, God, how are we ever going to top that? In a lot of instances, you're bringing, it's maybe the music was ahead of its time, and before the general public could really accept what it was, the band already gone their separate ways. So I don't know. Each one probably has a different reason why they didn't continue on past that, so it's hard to say. From Jamie Laszlo, and our last question of the day. You recently talked about the sad state of music today and seemed genuinely heartbroken. Yeah, it sucks. It really does. I myself can't believe what gets passed off as music, and I feel things are getting progressively worse. I used to think Britney Spears sucked, and then Justin Bieber came around and made things even worse. But now auto-tune artists like Lil Nas X and his piece of shit song, Old Town Road, come along and make Bieber seem like Paul McCartney. So if the quality of pop music is deteriorating at such a rapid speed, where do you see it 10 or 20 years from now? I can't see it getting any worse, but then again, I'm sure society will find a way. Maybe one day we will have robots with manufactured voices making music. And you know what? Don't put it past it. Because I think it's going to come to a point at some point in time where musicians and artists are going to, they're making no money now. What's it going to be in 5 years? You think it's going to get any better? Because, especially the younger generation, they don't want to, I apologize if I'm going to be retreading open wounds again here. But, a lot of the younger generation don't want to, and I say a lot, the majority, there's plenty that are fine and want to pay for music, but, the majority, they want everything for free, okay? And at some point, people who create music for a living are not going to be able to make a living anymore, and they're going to have to find something else to do. So what happens when nobody's creating music anymore? You either have to just get by with the stuff that's already been created, or you manufacture it somehow, right? Who knows how that's going to be? It's bad enough now. But in saying that, yes, a lot of the popular music is absolutely horrible. And no, that's not going to get any better. That's going to continue to suck and suck ass like it's doing now. And it's been sucking ass for a while. You know, the stuff you see, the Billboard top 20 hot singles and, you know, whatever, you know, shit you see performed at the Grammy Awards, and, you know, it's crap. Here today, gone tomorrow. Like I said, nobody has any loyalty to any bands or artists. You know, who's popular today is not going to be popular a year from now. You know, people who are really popular, you know, 2-3 years ago, where are they now? Who knows? Having kids somewhere, sitting in obscurity. Nobody gives a crap that maybe they're doing something else for a living. So, but the thing is, there's still great music being recorded. I can't stress this enough, people. There is still great music out there that is being self-released or on small mom-and-pop labels. Maybe not as much, you know, you don't hear as much happening here in this country, but I can't stress enough. If you love like vintage 70s style music or hard rock or prog, man, there's stuff coming out of Sweden and Norway and Finland that is fucking great. And if you're missing it, shame on you. Okay, so, you know, again, I get it. And again, Jamie, this is not directed at you. I get that a lot of people complain that there's no good music out there today. Stop paying attention to the Billboard Top 100, because what's on there is crap. That is not where anybody who wants to experience something worthwhile should be paying attention to and looking at. You ain't going to find anything from there. Trust me on that. You're not going to find anything from hit radio. You're not going to hear anything new on classic rock radio. Shit, you're not even going to hear anything new and exciting on satellite radio. Okay? Telling you. Go visit sites like Sea of Tranquility or others like it, and people who are reviewing new music by non-major record labels, and reviewing product by unsigned bands and artists. Okay? That's where you know, go and visit you know, SoundCloud pages and Bandcamp pages and listen to some of this new original music that's out there. That's whether you want to stream it, you want to buy it on CD, whatever you want to do, or download it. It's out there. I'm telling you. Just everybody needs to stop being lazy and go and do a little bit of work. Because I tell you, all the people who complain that there's no good new music out there are not doing the research and not doing the work. Bullshit. There is plenty of great new music out there by bands that are starving for either our money or our attention, or even just our views, right? I'm telling you. It's like, you know, we've created this mess, unfortunately. But the artists, the musicians, have not stopped creating great music. It's out there. So, like I said, I get impatient with people who say, yeah, no, there's no good bands anymore. There's no good new music being stuff. I turn on the radio on and hear anything new, and I'm like, well, why are you doing that? You should already know that you're not gonna find it that way. You know, I would love, maybe I should do this. I would love to do like a series of like seminars on how to educate people on how to find good new music for them to listen to in the styles that they like, the genres that they like, because people depending on the old ways of how it used to work in the old days to get introduced to new things. It's just like anything else, right? So, you know, it's just like the people who, you know, complain that there's not good movies playing in the movie theaters. Well, you know what it is? The movie theaters only play like those 10 films that come out that are by the major directors and have, you know, all the major, you know, big stars in them and stuff like that. You know how many movies get produced and released on a monthly basis? It's mind-boggling. You know, if you subscribe to cable or any of these, like, you know, streaming services or whatever, and you go look at the movies that are available for rental, it's mind-boggling how many movies come out that you never even knew came out because they didn't review them in the newspaper, or Rolling Stone didn't review them, or because they're not on the marquee at your local you know, Cineplex 10 you know, 10 I'm drawing a blank. Whatever it's called, you know, multiplex, right? You got eight screens, that's what I'm looking for. You know, your 10-screen multiplex down the street. It's got, you know, it's got the latest Tom Cruise movie, the latest superhero movie, the latest Star Wars movie, the latest Disney animated thing, maybe a stupid comedy or two, and then maybe a horror, you know, the latest Halloween movie, right? And that's it. And most people assume that that's the only movies that are being released. Well, you know what? Dumb fuck, it's not. All right? It's like they're making thousands and thousands of movies all the time that, you know, unless you go do the research, it's like, oh my God, I didn't know that Brad Pitt did this little indie film 4 months ago. Well, no, because it's not playing at your, it's, you know, it's, I guess the point I'm trying to make is society has just, it's like, unless someone tells you, here, watch this, here, listen to this is great, people don't go out of their way to find what they really want, to find something that's going to appeal to them and really, you know, speak to them on a personal level. Okay? One of the reasons why I do this, okay, whether it be on the YouTube channel or on the webzine, is to help people, to introduce people to good music that they might like, so they can go on their own and investigate. I don't do this for myself. I do this to help people and help the bands get their music out, okay? To describe what I'm hearing, why you may want to listen to this, all right? And so I know a lot of people come to this YouTube channel, okay, because they want to learn of things that they will then go and see. Maybe I'll like that. You know what Pete just said? That sounds great. I'm going to go listen to that album. You know how many people thank me all the time? Like, you know, it's because of shows like you that help me to find stuff that I wouldn't necessarily have found on my own. And that's great, okay? But you can't always rely on me, right? You got to do some work yourself, too. So, and again, I know the majority of the general public not interested in it. They just want to be force-fed stuff all the time. It's like, oh yeah, they're telling me this is a great song. I'm going to go download it. That's it. You know, forget the fact that there's an album behind it, right? Oh yeah, I heard the one song. That was cool. There's an album. You know, whatever. So, anyway, this is on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube. If you're watching this now, hopefully the day is just as glorious by you as it is here. And we'll see you next week with another episode of Questions and Answers. But as, of course, you know, we got a lot of great stuff coming up every damn day. So stay tuned, and we'll see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.